First contact with human innovation. Commander Zixtel stood at the observation deck of the Nexus Seeker, his iridescent scales reflecting the dim light of the distant star. The exploration vessel hung silent in the void, cloaked from any primitive detection systems this backwater system might possess. As Chief Scientific Officer of the Galactic Confederation's Advanced Technology Acquisition Division, he had expected this mission to be routine. Observe, analyze, and document whatever quaint tools these newly spacefaring humans had managed to cobble together. Commander, we're detecting unusual energy signatures from the third planet's largest moon, reported Senior Analyst Vectra, her crystalline sensory apparatus pulsing with excitement. It appears to be different from our initial intelligence reports. Zixtel glided closer to the holographic display, his four eyes narrowing as he studied the readings. The humans had only achieved faster-than-light travel 15 of their years ago, yet here they were, maintaining what appeared to be a substantial mining operation on their moon. Intelligence had suggested they were still relying on primitive chemical rockets and basic resource extraction methods. "Magnification, please," he ordered, and the display shifted to show a sprawling lunar facility. What caught his attention wasn't the facility's size. The Confederation built much larger, but rather its efficiency. There were no massive crews of workers scurrying about, no fleet of cargo ships. Instead, a handful of unusual machines moved with precise purpose across the lunar surface. Those devices, he gestured with a primary manipulator. "What are they?" Vectra adjusted her sensors. "They appear to be automated mining units, sir, but the energy readings are puzzling. They're operating at an efficiency level that exceeds our most advanced mining platforms by nearly 40%. Zixtel felt his scales ripple with disbelief. "Impossible. Run the analysis again." "Sir," interrupted Navigation Officer Krell, his tentacles twisting in agitation. "One of the units is approaching a new excavation site. Perhaps we should observe." The crew fell silent as they watched. The human machine, boxy and inelegant by Confederation standards, positioned itself near a promising mineral deposit. Instead of deploying the expected energy beams or molecular disassemblers, it extended what looked like primitive mechanical drills. "How quaint," Zixtel began to say, but the words died in his throat as the drills engaged. The lunar rock didn't just break apart. It seemed to flow like liquid, transformed into a precise stream of filtered material that fed directly into the machine's processing units. No waste, no excess energy signature, just perfect material conversion. That's not possible," Vectra whispered. "The energy requirements alone should be." "Get me a complete scan," Zixtel ordered, his professional demeanor cracking. "Every detail. How are they achieving molecular separation at that scale with such minimal energy input?" The next few hours were a revelation. They watched as the human machines worked in concert, each one appearing simple on the surface but containing layers of innovation that defied Confederation engineering principles. Where Confederation mining required massive energy expenditure to break down and sort materials, the humans had somehow developed a mechanical system that used the material's own properties against itself. "Sir," Vectra's voice had taken on a strange tone. "I've completed the efficiency calculations. These machines, they're not just better than ours. They're operating on principles we don't fully understand. The humans have developed something entirely new." Zixtel felt his worldview shifting. The Confederation had always assumed that technological advancement followed a linear path, from chemical to atomic to quantum to dark energy manipulation. Yet here were the humans, barely out of their gravity well, creating solutions that worked sideways to everything the Confederation knew. "Look at this," Krell called out, directing their attention to a new display. "They're not just mining. The processed materials are being fed directly into automated manufacturing units. The entire operation, from extraction to refinement to construction, is a closed-loop system. No waste, no delays, no inefficiencies." The implications were staggering. The Confederation's mining operations required vast fleets, enormous energy expenditure, and complex supply chains. The humans had instead created a system that was elegant in its simplicity, yet profound in its effectiveness. "Sir," Vectra's voice had dropped to a near whisper, Should we proceed with the original mission parameters, the acquisition of human technology for study?" Zixtal stared at the display, watching as another human machine transformed solid rock into sorted, refined materials with casual ease. His orders had been clear: identify and acquire promising human technologies for Confederation analysis. But now, "No," he said finally. "We're going to do something unprecedented. Signal the human facility. Use the first contact protocols." The crew stared at him in shock. "Sir," Krell ventured, "we're supposed to remain covered. The mission directive." "The mission directive assumed we were dealing with primitive technology we could easily reproduce," Zixtal interrupted. "We're not. We're dealing with innovation we barely understand. And I suspect this is just the surface of what humans have achieved." As the communication array powered up, Zixtal reflected on how quickly certainty could transform into humility. They had come to study what they assumed would be primitive human technology. Instead, they were about to initiate diplomatic contact with a species that had taken one of the galaxy's oldest challenges, resource extraction, and solved it in a way no one had considered possible. "Sir," Vectra said quietly as they waited for the humans to respond, "do you think they'll be willing to share their knowledge?" Zixtal watched as another mining unit transformed lunar rock into refined materials with that impossible efficiency. "I hope so, Vectra, because I suspect we have far more to learn from them than they from us, and I want to know what other impossible things these humans have achieved while we weren't looking." The communication array hummed to life as the first response from the lunar facility came through. Zixtal straightened his posture, aware that he was about to demonstrate something the Confederation rarely had to show: humility in the face of superior innovation. As the first human face appeared on the screen, he prepared to admit that sometimes the greatest discoveries come not from finding what you're looking for, but from being willing to recognize when you found something far more valuable instead. The attempted heist. The humans' response was not what Commander Zixtal had expected. Instead of surprise or alarm at an alien vessel suddenly appearing near their lunar facility, the facility's director, a human named Dr. Sarah Chen, merely smiled and asked if they'd like a tour. "We've been wondering when someone would notice our little operation," she said through the translator, her expression suggesting this was somehow amusing. "Though I admit, we expected the Arcturians first. They've been lurking around the Kuiper Belt for months." Zixtal exchanged glances with Vectra. The humans knew about other alien observations. The implications were disturbing. Either human sensor technology was far more advanced than believed, or, "Please, dock at Bay 3, Dr. Chen continued. "Our gravity systems are calibrated for multiple species. You should find it comfortable." As the Nexus Seeker maneuvered toward the indicated bay, Krell's tentacles twisted nervously. "Commander, this seems too easy. Our intelligence suggested humans were paranoid about external threats." "Perhaps we were wrong about that too," Zixtal replied, though he shared the concern. Everything they'd believed about human technological development was proving incorrect. What else had they misunderstood? The docking procedure was flawless, the human system automatically adjusting to their ship's specifications without any input needed. It was another small sign that human technology was far more sophisticated than its outward appearance suggested. Dr. Chen met them at the airlock, accompanied by only two others: a tall human male introduced as Chief Engineer Marcus Wong, and a shorter female who served as head of security, Colonel Maria Rodriguez. No armed guards, no obvious weapons. Either the humans were naive or very, very confident. "We'll start with the primary extraction facility," Dr. Chen said, leading them through corridors that seemed unnecessarily spacious. "Though I suspect you've already analyzed our basic processes from orbit." Vectra's crystalline structure flickered with embarrassment, But Dr. Chen waved it off. Please, we have done the same. Curiosity drives progress, after all. The tour was illuminating, but something felt off to Zixtal. The humans were being completely open about their technology, explaining complex processes with casual ease. They showed them the automated mining units up close, massive machines that somehow used mechanical principles to achieve what the Confederation required quantum technology to accomplish. The breakthrough, Engineer Wang explained, was realizing we were approaching the problem from the wrong direction. Everyone tries to force materials to behave how they want. We just figured out how to ask nicely. He laughed at their confusion, but Zixtal was focused on something else. Throughout the facility, he'd noticed small, seemingly decorative panels on the walls. They appeared to be simple metal designs, but his enhanced vision detected subtle energy patterns emanating from them. The humans were showing them everything, explaining everything, but Zixtal was becoming increasingly certain they weren't seeing the whole picture. Commander, Vectra whispered during a break in the tour, I've been analyzing the energy signatures. This facility's power output is far higher than what we're seeing used. There's something else here. Zixtal had reached the same conclusion. The humans were hiding something big. And despite his earlier decision to approach diplomatically, the mission's original parameters surfaced in his mind. If the humans had developed technology this advanced in one area, what else had they achieved? The opportunity came near the end of the tour. Dr. Chen was called away to deal with an issue in another section, leaving them briefly with Wang and Rodriguez. Zixtal gave the prearranged signal. Vectra's crystalline form pulsed with a precise frequency, designed to interfere with most known security systems. Krell deployed a small device that should have created a temporary blind spot in any surveillance. Nothing happened. You know, Colonel Rodriguez said conversationally, not even turning around. Most species try to steal our tech at least once. It's practically a rite of passage at this point. The decorative panels on the walls suddenly didn't look so decorative anymore. The entire corridor hummed with contained energy. The funny thing is, Engineer Wang added, still examining a display panel as if nothing was happening, everyone focuses on the big machines, the obvious tech. Nobody ever asks about the simple stuff. Like how we keep our coffee hot, Rodriguez said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Or why we still used physical buttons sometimes instead of neural interfaces. Or why there's so much empty space in our corridors. The humming increased. Zixtal realized with growing horror that what they'd mistaken for primitive or inefficient design choices were actually layers of technology so advanced they hadn't even recognized them as technology. The mining machines, he said slowly, they're not your most advanced technology at all, are they? They're just what you're willing to show. Give the commander a prize, Rodriguez replied. Though to be fair, the mining tech is pretty impressive. We're quite proud of that elegant little solution. Little solution. Vectra's crystalline form vibrated with disbelief. It revolutionizes molecular engineering. Sure, Wang agreed. But it's not exactly our biggest breakthrough. Want to know what is? Before Zixtal could respond, he felt a strange sensation. Looking down, he realized he could see through his own manipulator, some kind of quantum phase technology. But the energy requirements for that would be defense systems, Rodriguez said, answering his unspoken question. See, we humans learned pretty early that the best technology isn't about raw power or theoretical complexity. It's about elegant solutions to practical problems, like how to defend a facility without revealing your capabilities. The empty corridors, Zixtal realized. They're not empty at all. Now you're getting it, Wang nodded. Turns out space itself is pretty easy to manipulate if you understand its properties. Kind of like how our mining machines work with material properties instead of against them. The phase effect was spreading. Zixtal could see his crew experiencing the same phenomenon. They weren't being killed or even injured, just rendered temporarily incorporeal. Don't worry, Rodriguez assured them. The effect is temporary. We find it's a good way to make a point without causing any actual harm. Very elegant solution, wouldn't you say? Dr. Chen returned, looking apologetic. I'm sorry about this, Commander. We really were hoping for a purely diplomatic exchange, but we've learned to be prepared for alternative approaches. How? Vectra managed to ask, her crystalline form now almost completely transparent. Your species has only had FTL technology for 15 years. Dr. Chen's smile was genuine, but held a hint of steel. Who said FTL was our first major breakthrough? We solved quite a few other interesting problems while figuring out how to cross the light barrier. Necessity is the mother of invention, after all. The last thing Sixtol saw before the phase effect completed was Wong tapping one of the decorative wall panels. You know what the real irony is. The engineer said, if you'd just asked, we probably would have shared everything anyway. Humans are pretty big on collaboration. When Sixtol and his crew regained corporeal form, they found themselves back on their ship, safely docked, but with their engines cold. A message waited on their main display. When you're ready for a real discussion about technological exchange and cooperation, we'll be here. Bring coffee. We've got some fascinating theories about thermodynamic efficiency we'd love to discuss. Just remember, next time, ask nicely. P.S. We've taken the liberty of upgrading your ship's waste recycling system. The new coffee maker in your galley works much better with clean water. Consider it a gesture of good faith. Regards, the simple humans with their simple machines. Zixtel stared at the message for a long moment before turning to his crew. Send a message to command. Tell them we need to seriously revise our understanding of human technological development. And Vectra. Yes, Commander. See if you can figure out how that coffee maker works. Something tells me understanding that might be more important than we think. Trapped by our own arrogance, the coffee maker mocked them. It sat innocently on the galley counter of the Nexus Seeker, a seemingly simple device of brushed metal and clean lines. For 3 days, Vectra had been studying it, and for 3 days, it had defied every analysis attempt she made. It's not even properly sealed, she complained, her crystalline form pulsing with frustration. There are gaps in the casing that serve no apparent purpose. The power draw is negligible. The thermal management system appears to operate on principles that violate at least 3 laws of thermodynamics. And yet it makes perfect coffee. Commander Zixtel finished, staring at the cup of steaming liquid before him. The humans had included detailed instructions for various beverages the device could produce, along with notes about which ones were safe for different species biochemistry. The device epitomized everything that was proving maddening about human technology. On the surface, it appeared almost primitive. Physical buttons instead of neural interfaces, mechanical parts instead of quantum assemblers. But the deeper they looked, the more they realized that every single component had been engineered with a sophistication that bordered on artistic. Command still hasn't responded to our report, Krell noted, his tentacles writhing anxiously. I don't think they believe us. Would you? Zixtal asked, not taking his eyes off the coffee maker. We went from believing humans were barely beyond chemical rockets to discovering they can manipulate the fundamental properties of spacetime, and they treat it as casually as we treat atmospheric processors. The ship's communications array chimed. Another message from the lunar facility. They'd been receiving one every day since the failed theft attempt, each containing the same polite invitation to return for proper discussions. Today's message was different. Commander, Dr. Chen's holographic form appeared above their conference table. I hope you've been enjoying the coffee maker. We thought it might help demonstrate a point about human engineering philosophy. Have you figured it out yet? Vectra's crystalline structure dimmed slightly. The device appears to operate using principles we don't fully understand. Actually, Chen smiled, it operates using principles you understand perfectly well. You just never thought to combine them that way. But that's not why I'm calling. We've detected a situation developing in your sector that you should be aware of. The hologram shifted to show a spatial diagram. Multiple ships were approaching their position. Confederation vessels, heavily armed. Your superiors seem to have decided that your report indicates we're either a threat or a valuable target. Chen continued, her tone still conversational. They'll be arriving in approximately 6 hours. We thought you might appreciate a heads up. Zixtel felt his scales flatten against his body. You can detect our ships at that range. Through their stealth systems. Commander, Chen's smile took on a hint of pity. We detected them the moment they left their staging area. Just like we detected your ship long before you thought you were in sensor range. But that's not important right now. What's important is what happens next. You're going to defend your facility, Zixtel stated. It wasn't a question. No need, Chen replied. We're going to demonstrate another principle of human engineering. The best solution is often the one that prevents the problem in the first place. Watch your power systems. Before Zixtel could respond, every display on the Nexus Seeker flickered. For a moment, he thought the humans were attacking them. But no, this was different. The ship's systems were upgrading themselves. That coffee maker wasn't just a beverage dispenser, Chen explained as new information flooded their screens. It's been gradually optimizing your ship's systems, teaching them how to be more efficient. Your power grid now operates on principles similar to our mining machines, working with energy's natural properties instead of forcing it to behave. Vectra's crystalline form pulsed rapidly as she processed the data. These power efficiency ratings, they're impossible. Improbable, Chen corrected, not impossible. Just like it's improbable that your approaching fleet will be able to maintain weapon lock on a target they can't properly detect, or maintain shield coherency when their power systems are trying to optimize themselves in ways their safety protocols don't understand. Zixtel understood suddenly. You're not going to fight them. You're going to let their own technology defeat them. Now you're getting it. Chen nodded. Violence is rarely the most elegant solution. We find it's better to let people learn from their mistakes. Speaking of which, would you like to know what else that coffee maker has been teaching your ship? Over the next hour, Chen and her team explained what had really been happening during the past 3 days. The coffee maker, it turned out, was both a demonstration and a teaching tool. While Vectra had been studying it, it had been studying them, learning their technology, understanding their engineering principles, and gradually introducing improvements. Your ship now has a basic understanding of human engineering principles, Wang explained, joining the holographic conversation. Nothing classified or dangerous, just enough to demonstrate that there are other ways to approach problems. The real question, Rodriguez added, appearing beside them, is what you're going to do with this knowledge. Your fleet will be here soon, expecting to find either a threat to eliminate or technology to seize. Instead, they're going to find their own ships experiencing unexpected upgrades. Zixtel looked at the coffee maker again, finally understanding. The gaps in the casing weren't flaws. They were precisely calculated channels for thermal management. The simple mechanical buttons contained sensor arrays more sophisticated than anything the Confederation had developed. Every single component served multiple purposes, all working in harmony with natural principles instead of trying to override them. You've been teaching us, he said slowly. This whole time, even during our attempted theft, you were teaching us. Humans have a saying, Chen replied. Give a man a fish and you feed him for a day. Teach a man to fish and you feed him for a lifetime. We could have just given you our technology, but then you wouldn't understand the principles behind it. This way, you learn. The ship's sensors picked up the approaching Confederation fleet. As predicted, their systems were already beginning to behave erratically as the optimization protocols spread through their networks. What do we do now? Krell asked, watching the chaos unfold. Now, Chen said, you make a choice. Your fleet will be stuck here for at least a day while their systems adjust to their new efficiency standards. During that time, you can either continue treating us as a threat to be conquered or studied, or you can dock at Bay 3 again. And this time, We'll show you how that coffee maker really works." Zixtal looked at his crew, seeing the same realization in their expressions. They had come to steal human technology, believing themselves superior. Instead, they had found themselves humbled not by force or violence, but by the simple elegance of human innovation. "Dr. Chen," he said finally, "I believe we would very much like to learn how to make coffee properly." "Excellent choice, Commander." Chen's hologram smiled. "And don't worry about your fleet. The optimization process includes a very comprehensive instruction manual. They'll figure it out eventually. Humanity's greatest weapon, after all, isn't our technology. It's our willingness to share it with those who ask nicely." Learning humility. The Confederation fleet hung motionless in space, their sophisticated warships reduced to drifting hulks by their own optimization protocols. Commander Zixtal watched from the observation deck of the lunar facility as repair shuttles darted between the vessels, carrying engineering teams armed not with weapons, but with instruction manuals and coffee. "It's fascinating, really," Engineer Wang said, standing beside him. "Your ships are trying to upgrade themselves to more efficient systems, but your engineers keep attempting to force them back to normal operation parameters. They're literally fighting against becoming better." Zixtal's scales rippled with embarrassment. "We're trained to maintain systems within established parameters. The idea of letting technology evolve, it goes against everything we believe about proper engineering." "And that," Dr. Chen said, as she entered the observation deck, "is exactly the problem we're trying to help you overcome. Your civilization has become so focused on controlling and directing technological development that you've forgotten how to innovate." The past 12 hours had been enlightening, to say the least. After accepting the humans' invitation to return, Zixtal and his crew had received a true education in human engineering philosophy. It wasn't just about the technology. It was about the entire approach to problem solving. "Watch this," Wang said, pulling up a holographic display. It showed the internal power distribution network of a Confederation destroyer. "See how your systems force energy to flow in predetermined patterns. Now watch what happens when you let it find its own optimal path." The display shifted, showing energy flowing like water, taking naturally efficient routes through the ship's systems. Power output increased by 40%, while waste heat decreased by 60%. "But how do you maintain control?" Vectra asked, her crystalline form pulsing with confusion. "How do you ensure the systems don't become chaotic?" "That's the beautiful part," Wang grinned. "You don't need to control chaos. You just need to understand it and work with it. Here, let me show you something even more interesting." He led them to a small laboratory where a familiar device sat on a workbench, another coffee maker, partially disassembled. "This is where it all started for us, believe it or not," Chen explained. "Not with this exact machine, but with this approach to engineering. See, humans used to think like you do, always trying to force technology to behave exactly as we wanted. Then we had a breakthrough. With coffee makers." Krell's tentacles twisted skeptically. "With understanding flow," Wang corrected. "Coffee making is actually an incredibly complex process of thermodynamics, fluid mechanics, and chemical extraction. Most species try to brute force it with high-pressure systems and precise temperature controls. We learned to let the water find its own best path through the grounds. That's why the coffee maker we gave you seemed so simple," Chen added. "It's not forcing anything. It's just creating the right conditions for optimal flow, then letting nature do the work. The same principle we use in our mining machines, our power systems, even our spacecraft." Zixtal stared at the disassembled device with new understanding. "The gaps in the casing. Natural cooling channels." Wang nodded. "Why force air through complex cooling systems when you can just create pathways that encourage optimal heat dissipation? Once you understand the principles, you can apply them to anything." A commotion from the communication array interrupted them. One of the Confederation ships had managed to restore their original system's configuration, and immediately lost 40% of their power efficiency. The humans watched with amusement as the ship's engineers celebrated their success at returning to inferior technology. "They'll figure it out eventually," Chen sighed. "Just like we did." You know, there's a human saying, the more complex the system, the more likely it is to fail. We learn to seek elegance instead of complexity. "But your technology is incredibly complex," Vectra objected. "The principles behind your mining machines alone." "The principles are complex," Wang agreed. "The implementation doesn't have to be. Think about it. Which is more complex? A system that forces rock to break apart using massive energy expenditure, or one that simply encourages it to follow its natural tendencies?" Over the next few hours, the humans continued their education, showing example after example of how their technology worked with natural principles instead of against them. They demonstrated manufacturing systems that assembled materials by creating conditions where molecular bonds naturally formed optimal patterns. Power systems that channeled energy through paths it wanted to follow anyway. Even their FTL drives operated by working with spacetime's natural properties, rather than trying to brute force their way through it. "The really interesting part," Chen said as they watched another Confederation ship struggle with its newly optimized systems, "is that none of this is actually new technology. The principles have always been there, waiting to be discovered. We just had to learn to stop fighting against them." "But how did you discover this approach?" Zixtal asked. "What made humans think to try working with natural systems instead of controlling them?" Chen and Wang exchanged glances. "Necessity," Chen said finally. "And coffee, believe it or not. We needed to solve problems with limited resources, so we had to get creative. And somewhere along the way, probably while trying to make the perfect cup of coffee, we realized that the universe already knows how to do most things perfectly well. We just needed to learn to listen to it. And now you're teaching us," Zixtal realized. "Not just the technology, but the entire philosophy behind it." "Exactly," Wang smiled. "Because here's the thing about human innovation. It's not about the specific technologies we create. It's about learning to see problems differently. Once you understand that, you can innovate in ways we haven't even thought of yet." A message came through from the Confederation fleet. After hours of struggling against their optimized systems, they were finally asking for help understanding them. Chen's smile widened. "Perfect timing," she said. "Commander, would you like to help explain to your superiors why fighting against improvement is less effective than learning to work with it?" Zixtal looked at the coffee maker on the workbench, then at the fleet of sophisticated warships that had been humbled by human innovation. He thought about how his own preconceptions about technology had been completely transformed in just a few days. "Yes," he said finally. "But first, I think they need to learn how to make a proper cup of coffee. After all, you humans seem to think that's where all the best innovations begin." "Now you're getting it," Chen laughed. "Remember, Commander, the universe already knows how to do everything perfectly. Our job isn't to force it to do what we want, but to understand how it wants to do things and work with that. Sometimes the most advanced technology looks deceptively simple because it's not fighting against nature, it's working in harmony with it." As they prepared to meet with the Confederation fleet's commanders, Zixtal realized that the humans had given them something far more valuable than advanced technology. They had given them a new way of thinking, a new approach to understanding the universe itself. And it all started with a simple cup of coffee. A new understanding. 3 months after the failed attempt to steal human technology, Commander Zixtal stood before the Confederation High Council, preparing to deliver what might be the most important presentation of his career. Beside him, Dr. Chen adjusted the simple metal case she had brought, their visual aid for today's demonstration. "Are you sure about this approach?" he whispered to her. "The Council expects a full technical briefing on human engineering capabilities." "Trust me," Chen smiled. "Sometimes the simplest demonstration is the most effective. Remember what we learned about working with natural tendencies rather than against them." The council chamber was packed. News of the lunar facility incident had spread throughout the Confederation, spawning wild theories about human technological capabilities. Some claimed humans had developed reality-warping technology. Others insisted they must have discovered ancient alien artifacts. Nobody seemed willing to accept the simple truth. Honorable Council, Zixtal began, his scales shifting to formal presentation patterns. 3 months ago, I led a mission to assess human technological development. What we discovered has fundamentally changed our understanding of not just human capabilities, but of technological development itself. The council members stirred, their various appendages and sensory organs focused intently on the commander. They had read his reports, of course, but most had dismissed them as exaggerations or misunderstandings, rather than deliver a traditional briefing. Zixtal continued, "We believe a demonstration will be more effective." Dr. Chen. Chen stepped forward, placing the metal case on the presentation platform. Esteemed council members, what you're about to see is not our most advanced technology. In fact, it's something most humans take for granted. But it perfectly demonstrates the principles that define human innovation. She opened the case, revealing a coffee maker, nearly identical to the one that had first taught Zixtal's crew about human engineering philosophy. The council chamber erupted in confused murmuring. The head counselor, a massive entity of pure energy contained within a regulation field, pulsed with skepticism. "Commander Zixtal," the counselor's translated voice boomed, "you claim humans possess technology that surpasses our understanding, and you bring us a beverage preparation device." "Yes," Chen replied before Zixtal could respond, "because this beverage preparation device contains examples of every major principle that makes human technology different from yours. Commander, would you like to explain what you've learned?" Zixtal moved to the coffee maker, his scales now rippling with confidence. "Look at this device through your standard engineering analysis. What do you see? Gaps in the casing that appear to be design flaws. Mechanical buttons instead of neural interfaces. Simple heating elements instead of molecular excitation fields. By every standard we use to measure technological advancement, this device should be primitive." He paused, letting that sink in. "But watch what happens when it operates." Chen activated the coffee maker. As it began its cycle, Zixtal directed the council's attention to the holographic displays showing detailed sensor readings. "Observe the thermal distribution patterns," he continued. "The gaps you dismissed as flaws. They're creating perfect natural convection currents, cooling the device more efficiently than any active cooling system we've developed. The mechanical buttons. They contain sensor arrays that adapt to the user's specific biology, ensuring optimal interface regardless of species. But the real innovation," Chen added, "is in how it handles the coffee preparation itself. Your species typically approach this process by precisely controlling every variable: water temperature, pressure, extraction time. This device instead creates conditions that allow these elements to naturally achieve optimal states." The council members watched in fascination as the sensor readings revealed layer after layer of sophisticated engineering principles, all working in perfect harmony with natural physical laws rather than trying to override them. "This is the fundamental difference in human engineering philosophy," Zixtal explained, "where we try to force materials and energy to behave as we wish. Humans have learned to work with their natural properties. Their mining machines don't break rocks. They encourage rocks to break themselves. Their power systems don't direct energy flow. They create paths energy wants to follow." "But surely such an approach has limitations," one council member objected. "Some processes require precise control." "Do they?" Chen asked. She pulled up new displays, showing the operating principles of various human technologies. "We used to think the same way. Then we started asking different questions. Instead of how do we make this do what we want, we asked what does it want to do naturally, and how can we use that?" The demonstration continued, with Zixtal and Chen showing how the same principles apply to everything from spacecraft design to molecular manufacturing. The coffee maker served as a continuous practical example, its operation demonstrating in real time how working with natural properties could achieve results that brute force technology couldn't match. Consider the implications, Zixtal concluded. Every ship in our fleet could operate at 40% higher efficiency with 60% less waste, simply by allowing their power systems to follow optimal natural patterns instead of forcing them to follow our predetermined paths. Our mining operations could extract resources at 10 times their current rate while causing zero environmental damage, just by working with geological processes instead of against them. And this is just the beginning, Chen added. These principles can be applied to any technological challenge. The universe already knows the most efficient way to do everything. We just have to learn to listen to it instead of trying to impose our will upon it. The council chamber had grown quiet, the various members contemplating the implications. Finally, the head counselor spoke again. Dr. Chen, why are humans willing to share this knowledge? Surely such advantages could be used to establish dominance in the galaxy. Chen smiled, pouring cups of coffee for those council members whose biology could process it, because that would go against the very principles we're trying to teach. Forcing our approach on others would be just as inefficient as forcing energy to flow against its natural paths. Instead, we create conditions that encourage natural cooperation and mutual benefit. Just as this device, Zixtal added, doesn't force water through the coffee grounds, but creates conditions where the water naturally extracts the optimal flavor compounds. The same principle applies to species interaction. Create the right conditions, and cooperation becomes the natural state. One by one, the council members who could safely consume coffee tried their cups. The effect was immediate, expressions of surprise and pleasure in a dozen different biological forms. This is perfect, the head counselor admitted, their energy form pulsing with appreciation. Every compound extracted to exactly the right degree for maximum flavor without bitterness, because the water wanted to extract those compounds in exactly that way, Chen explained. We just had to learn how to let it. The same principle applies to everything. From coffee to spacecraft, from mining to mutual cooperation between species. Create the right conditions, and things naturally flow toward optimal states. The council session extended long into the day, with questions and demonstrations covering every aspect of human engineering philosophy. But the real breakthrough came during an informal moment, when one council member asked Chen how humans had developed this approach. Necessity, curiosity, and a lot of failed cups of coffee, she laughed. We had to solve problems with limited resources, so we learned to work smarter rather than harder. And somewhere along the way, we realized that the universe was trying to teach us how it wanted to work. We just had to learn to listen. As the session concluded, the council voted unanimously to establish a joint Human Confederation Engineering Academy, where these principles could be taught to the next generation of scientists and engineers from all species. Commander, Chen said as they left the chamber, I believe this is the beginning of something remarkable. Zixtal looked at his former target, now his teacher and friend, and felt his scales ripple with appreciation. Indeed. Though I have to ask, did you really need to bring the coffee maker? Surely there were more impressive examples of human technology we could have shown. Chen's smile held that familiar hint of hidden wisdom. Sometimes the simplest tools teach the most profound lessons. Besides, now every council member will associate these new ideas with the perfect cup of coffee they had today. Never underestimate the power of positive associations. As they walked toward their ship, Zixtal reflected on how far they'd come from that first attempted theft. They had sought to steal human technology, only to discover that the real treasure wasn't the technology itself, but the philosophy behind it. The humans hadn't just taught them new engineering principles, they'd shown them a new way of seeing the universe itself. And it all started with a simple cup of coffee.